Hello everybody and welcome to another React tutorial for beginners. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how we can style our website and style any React website really using a bunch of different methods. So when it comes to styling in React, there's a bunch of different ways you can go about doing this, and that's exactly what I want to cover here in this video. Now, what we're actually going to do at the end of the video is we're going to turn our really basic, ugly website that you guys have seen previously into something that looks like this. Now, no, this is not the most beautiful website in the world, but you can see things are aligned. We have some rows and columns. We have a table. We have some fields or forms that look decent. Well, that's going to be the goal of this video, is to get our website looking like something like this. All right, so I just want to quickly give a disclaimer here that I absolutely hate and suck at CSS. So I'm not going to write any manual CSS here. I'm going to show you 3 different ways that you could write your own manual CSS. And then in the last part of this video, you can see the timestamps on the video player, by the way. I will show you how we can import our own CSS library, or import a CSS library, called Bootstrap, and use Bootstrap to style this website. Now, in case you're unfamiliar with Bootstrap, it's a CSS library that comes with a bunch of pre-built classes, makes it really easy for people like me that suck at CSS to actually create a decent looking website. And so that will be at the end of the video. Before that, though, I'm going to show you the 3 different ways that you can have your own styles. All right, so enough of that introduction. Let's go ahead and get started here. The 3 different methods I'm going to start by showing you to implement your own manual CSS styling are the following. The first one is going to be a global style sheet. The second way is going to be CSS modules. So these are CSS modules or files specific to different components. And then finally, I will show you a React library called styled components that allows you to actually create a component that has some styles and then use that component inside of your application. That one's really cool. We'll get to that, obviously, I guess near the end of this section. Okay, so let's start by talking about global style sheets. What is a global style sheet? Well, right now, the way that we are styling our application is using a global style sheet. We have this index.css, and we have this app.css. Now, if you go to index.js, you can see that we've imported this style sheet right here. So as soon as you import a style sheet, this immediately becomes accessible to every single component inside of your application. So all of the code that you have, all of your React stuff can use any of the classes inside of a style sheet once it's been imported. So if you import a style sheet like this, and we've imported this in our index.js, this means every single thing that we render going on will be able to use all of these classes. So to show you a simple example here, let's make a class. Let's just call it .red. You can guess what I'm going to do here. I'm going to say color is red, and I'm going to show you that even though I imported index.css here, if I go inside of, let's say, item display, or actually search bar .js, I go to this div here and I say that the class name is equal to, and then I make this equal to red. If I go ahead and refresh my website here, you can see that we now have some red text. So even though I didn't import index.css in here, it was still accessible to this file because, well, it was imported previously. So that's kind of what you need to know about these types of style sheets and the way you import them. As soon as they are imported, they immediately apply, or all of the classes in them can be accessed by all of the other components in your React app. Okay, so what about app.css? So you can see here inside of app.js, we import app.css. Now, exact same thing applies here. As soon as this style sheet is imported, every single class, every single definition, whatever inside of here is accessible to all of the other applications, or sorry, all of the other components. I don't know why I said applications. Hopefully you get the idea. As soon as you import something in this way, they become global. Now, one thing to note here, though, is that if I go into, actually, let's go to app.js. Let me remove this import, and let me go to, say, item display. And let me put this right here. So import app.css. Let's say I don't render items display, and I never import this file. So if I go to app.js and I remove this import, so we'll just comment it out. So I'm going to comment that out, and I go here and I just comment out this line. Can I comment this out? No, I can't comment it out this way. Okay, we'll just remove it. So I'm going to remove it now. So now I am never using what's inside of items display. I never import this file. I never import the function. And so even though I've imported app.css here, this file is never going to be imported. So let me show you what I mean. Let's make a class. Let's actually call it .blue. And inside of here, I'm going to say color, if I spell that correctly, blue. Now, if I go to app.js and let's just put a p tag here, let's just say p test, and we'll put another p, and let's make this class name equal to, and then blue. Now ask yourself this question. Is this going to work? Are we going to actually be able to have this text be blue? All right, so ask yourself that question. I'm going to come here and notice this text is not blue. The reason this text is not blue is because this never got imported. Even though we said import, since we did not import this file here, this line of code never ran. This file was not included in what was kind of bundled up and served to our user or our client, and so we didn't see any blue text showing up. However, now if I come back here and I actually keep this import, I save this, and now I go back to my website, notice that this highlights in blue, because now I've imported something from this file. Doesn't even matter that I haven't used it, but I've imported something from this file, and now we're importing app.css because we have to read what's inside of this file. And so that's kind of how that works. So let me go back to what I had originally. Just wanted to show you that, again, as soon as you import one of those style sheets, it immediately becomes a global style sheet. Perfect. Okay, so hopefully everyone is clear on that. Let me just remove this import right here. That is how global style sheets work. So import them wherever you want, but just realize that as soon as they're imported, they're going to be global and they can be accessed by all the different components or wherever you want to access them in your React application. Again, the reason you would name them different things is just to keep some of your CSS organized. It's strictly just a readability thing. It doesn't actually change, the functionality of the CSS files. Okay, so that was global style sheets. Now we're going to talk about modules. So what happens if you do not want this app.css file here to be used anywhere else? You just want the styles here to apply to actually what's inside of just app.js, right? So you have app.css, you want this to correspond with app.js, and you don't want any classes or styles you define here to apply to anything other than what's inside of app.js. Well, the way you would do this is the following. You would start by renaming this file. Oops, wrong file. Rename this file to app.module.css. It's important that you add this .module. So app.module.css. Now inside of here, you do the exact same thing you would normally do. You define your style. So we have .blue, color blue. Now you're going to go into app.js, but this time, rather than importing app.css in this way, what you're going to do is you're going to import styles from app.css, and obviously you need to change this so it says app. And then this will be module.css. All right, so you've imported styles. This is an object, and now what you're going to do is use this styles object to access or reference all of your styles. I'll discuss how this works in a minute. But let's add our text in here. So let's add a p tag. Again, I probably should have just kept this. Let's call this test. And let's say now that the class name is equal to, and I'm going to do it inside of curly braces here. This is going to be equal to styles dot and then blue. So if I go to app.module.css, notice we have color blue and this is called blue. So that is a valid class for us to use. So now the class name of this p tag is styles.blue. So the way I access this, right, the way this works is you write styles dot and then whatever the class name is that you've defined and want to use inside of your CSS module. So if I had .red, then I would access it with styles.red, right? Pretty straightforward. That's how this works. Okay, so now that we've done that, what you're going to see is if I go back to my website here, looks like we're getting, oh, it's because I put that in my CSS file. Let me refresh. But notice now that this is blue, right? So that is working. But I want to prove to you that this style is only going to apply to something inside of app.js, right? Because we had it right here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to add item. And let's actually change this right here, the h2 tag, so that it has the class name blue. So class name is equal to, and then blue. All right, so I've used the class name that I defined inside of this module. So let's see if this works now. So let's go back to our website and notice that on add an item, even though this has the class name equal to blue, I'm refreshing my website, it's rendering, everything's good, it's not blue. And the reason it's not blue is because this class name blue, if I go here, is actually not defined within the scope of this file. Hopefully that kind of makes sense, but to just explain to you what happens when you use this app.module.css is actually this blue right here is not going to be called blue. This sounds really weird, but in a global scope, you can actually still access this class right here. So you can still access this blue class, but it's not going to be called blue. it's going to be called something else. There's kind of like a formula that defines what this will actually be named. But essentially, the point of this is that there'll be some prefix added to this, something like app underscore, module underscore blue, so that if you try to use blue, you won't access the styles inside of this file. You would need to have the prefix and then the actual name of the class. I understand this is a little bit confusing, but essentially imagine that what happens when you put it inside of this module file is it automatically adds some prefix to all of these classes so that you can't just access them without knowing what the prefix is from other files. And this means that you're not going to have all of these kind of class conflicts, for example. All right, so hopefully that is somewhat clear, but the whole idea of this is just to tell you, hey, when you name it blue inside of here, if you try to access it from somewhere else and it's inside of a module file, so here we're trying to access this, you're not going to access it. It's just not going to work. However, though, if I go inside of index.css and now I make a .blue, so I say .blue, and I know this is going to be weird, but I'm just going to make this color equal to actually red again, and I'm going to delete this red class here. So now if I make a .blue, I make its color, I think I can just type red, right? Yeah, make its color red. And now I go back to my website. You're going to see if I refresh here that this becomes red. So let's go to add item, see that I'm using the class name blue. Inside of my global style sheet, I made a class called blue and it has the color red. And then inside of my app.module.css, I have one called blue, but it has the color blue. Now, of course, add item is going to use the class defined inside of my global style sheet because that's the only one that it can see. It can't see the one inside of my module file. And again, that's kind of the point of this module file is that I have this specific blue class that's only used inside of app.js. And then in my global style sheet, I have a bunch of stuff that can be used anywhere. There you go. All right, so that's kind of how the modules work. Now, of course, you can make multiple modules, right? I can make another one here and call this add item .module.css. And then inside of here, I could define my own classes. And then inside of add item, I would go here and I would say import styles from, and then this would be the name of the file. So /, and then this is add item .module.css. I think I named that correctly. Okay. And then here I would do the same thing, right? So I would go to my div and rather than class name blue, I would say this is equal to styles.blue. Of course, if I had a blue class defined inside of that module file. All right, so let's just clean up some of these classes. I don't need all these class names here. So let's get rid of this class name. Let's just remove these modules because I'm going to delete them now. And actually, I'll just clean this up and then I'll be right back. All right, so I've just cleaned some stuff up and now I'm going to show you a few more methods to manually style your components. Now at the beginning of the video, I said I was going to show you 3 methods. I'm actually going to show you 4. The 4th method is not really very long. That's why I didn't mention it. It's just inline styles. I'll show you how we can do inline styles after I show you this cool module called styled components. All right, so as I said, the 3rd method here is a React library called styled components. So what we're going to do is install this library. So to do that, you're going to go into your inventory directory and you're going to type the following yarn add and then styled hyphen components like that. So go ahead, type yarn add styled components. This is going to take a second. It should install this for you. Now, if this doesn't work, don't worry. Once this is done, I'll be right back and I'll show you an additional way that you can install this because I know some of you guys were saying that your yarn command was not working. All right, so this has finished. I am now going to show you the additional way to do this. Rather than using yarn, we're going to use something called npm. So I'm just going to change yarn to say npm. I'm going to change add to say install. And then I'm just going to do hyphen save like this. And this is how we can install style component using npm. So a lot of you were saying your yarn command was not working. If your yarn command does not work, you can just usually replace whatever I write with npm. I'm not really going to explain the difference between npm and yarn right now. You guys can look that up and see the difference between them. Essentially, they're just 2 different ways to go about managing packages. Yarn is usually preferred if you have it. But of course, if your yarn command is not working, I'm not going to go through the whole process to debug how to get that to work. You can just quickly fix it by saying npm install hyphen save and then styled component. Although I think it's component actually. I forget if I installed styled component earlier or no, styled components. Yeah, so it is styled components. All right, so once this is done, I'll be right back and I'll show you how we can use this library. All right, so all of that is done. I've just gone to my app.js file, and now we can actually start using this library. So I'm going to go to the top of this file. I'm going to say import styled from, and then this is going to be styled hyphen components like that. So what this is actually going to allow us to do is to create a component that has default styles. So you'll see what I mean in 1 second, but the way you do this is just like you would create a functional component, except it's not going to be a function, it's just going to be a variable. So I'm going to say const, I'm going to make this say title, title like that, and this is going to be equal to styled dot and then h1. Now, h1 is just the h1 tag, right? So when you want to create styled components that are of like a root component, so h1, div, whatever, paragraph tag, whatever they are, you do style dot and then whatever that component is. So in this case, we have p. We could do style dot form, right? There's all kinds of other stuff. Now, I won't go through this entire package. I'm just showing you that this actually exists. So if you want to learn more about how this works, what you can do is go to the styled components website. They have some really good documentation that will explain this to you more in depth. But the basic idea is what you do is style dot and then whatever the tag is you want. In this case, I want h1. And then you do 2 backticks like this. And inside of these backticks is where you're going to define the styles for this component. Now, what is a backtick? On your keyboard, there's something called a tilde. I'll have my editor pop up what a backtick and a tilde is so you can see where they are, but it's usually right underneath your escape key. It's on the left side of your keyboard above the tab key. Some of you may have to use the function key to access it if you have like a shorter keyboard. Anyways, what it is above the tilde, you have this backtick, right? And you can just use the backtick. That's what it looks like. It looks like a quotation mark, but it's different. It's called a backtick. Okay, anyways, we got over that. Now inside of here, what I'm going to do is define some styles. So quite simply, I'm just going to say color, and this is going to be equal to blue. Straightforward, I'll put my semicolon like that. And now I'm going to show you how we can use this component. So just like we would use any other component, what we can do is go here. We can say title and change this to /title. And now if I go to my website here and I refresh, I need to rerun my website, sorry. So let's say yarn start, just because the development server wasn't running. Okay, so there you go. We can see now that we have test. This is an h1 tag, right? And it's popping up blue. And the reason it's popping up blue is because I used the title tag, which is the component I just defined right here. And it has the style color is equal to blue. That's literally all you need to do. Now you can make other components as well, right? You can say const, and you could say maybe container, right? And then this is equal to style dot. Maybe you make this a div, and then you have 2 backticks, and then maybe you do something like some padding or some margin, whatever. I'm not going to go through all of the manual styles, but this is how you would go about doing that. And then the same way, you could use container. Now, the last thing I'll show you here, though, is that how you can actually pass props to these components. So just like you've seen previously, in these types of components, I can pass a prop. I could pass something like color is equal to, and then make this equal to, actually, let's make it equal to a string, and we can pass maybe red, right? And when I pass the color, obviously I want that to apply to this component. So how would I actually get this to work? Well, what you can do is you can go to your component here, and you can say color is equal to, and then you're going to do a $. You're going to do 2 parentheses like this. Sorry, not parentheses, open bracket and closing bracket. And inside of here, you can reference the color by saying props dot and then color, right? So you could check if props.color exists. If props.color does exist, then you can say props.color. Otherwise, what you could do is say, maybe make it a default of black. So now if you pass a color, it will be whatever color it is that you pass it. Otherwise, it will be equal to black. Now, sorry, there's actually a different way that you need to do this. You need to say props and then an arrow like this. And now you're actually able to access them. Don't ask me why that's the syntax. That's just what it is. You need to say props. You do an arrow, and then you can write whatever it is you want to return here. So you're just creating an arrow function. You're saying, okay, I'm going to take in the props. I'm going to access the props.color. If that is not undefined, I'm going to use the props.color for the color. Otherwise, I'm going to show black. Okay, so you can see it's just kind of filled this in with parentheses now. I guess that's the proper way. Let's go here. Let me just refresh and notice that this works. It's now red. Now, if I go here and I change this to be blue, you're going to see that this should update and be blue. Okay, and then if I don't add any color at all, so I just do that, and then I go here, notice that it is just default black. Okay, so that is the basic syntax on how to do this. If you want to access the props, you put your arrow, so equal sign, and then I believe greater than sign or less than sign, whatever you want to call this. And then you can do something like an inline condition, which is what we just wrote. So we said if props.color is not undefined, show props.color, otherwise have it be black. Perfect. Okay, so that is all I'm going to show you for styled components. Again, feel free to reference their documentation. I'll leave a link in the description just so you can see more about how this works. All right, so I was just editing this video and I realized I forgot to show you the inline style, so I'm going to do that now. The way you do the inline styles is quite simple. So an inline style is just like any other inline style in HTML. You simply define the styles right in the line where you define the component or the tag. In this case, in React, all you do is say style is equal to, you do two sets of opening and closing brackets. The reason for this is you need to define that you actually have an object here for the style prop. So this is, of course, a prop, right? As we talked about before, it's going to be equal to an object. And inside of this object, you define all your styles just like you would in CSS. So you say something like color, colon, and then you could do like red. Then you would do a comma, not a semicolon, because it's an object and you're going to have multiple. And then, I don't know, maybe do like text size, whatever. I don't know what you would actually put here. But anytime you're going to have a hyphen, you would just replace that with an underscore and it should give you the appropriate style. So I don't think text size is actually a style here. I could be wrong or right, but then you would just put, 3, and there you go. Now you have your text size. So anyways, you can just do different styles like that. Really straightforward. Just remember that it's called style. This works for all of the different default components, right? So div, p, header, so on and so forth. Style equals opening bracket, then you do your object, then you have your closing bracket, and inside of the object, you define all of the styles. All right, that is how you do inline styles. Now let's move on to Bootstrap. Okay, so that's fun, that's great, but as I told you, I really do not want to write manual styles for this entire website. So what we're going to do instead is use Bootstrap. So now let me show you how we can install Bootstrap. Now, Bootstrap, as I was saying, is a CSS library, just comes with a bunch of pre-built styles for us, a bunch of pre-built classes, and it's really easy to kind of align things, change their color, make things larger, smaller, etc. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So to install Bootstrap, what we need to type is the following: npm install, and then react-bootstrap like that, and then Bootstrap afterwards. Now, I know some of you are going to get mad at me for mixing npm and yarn. There is a way that you can install this using yarn. Again, please do look up the difference between npm and yarn if you're interested. Not something I really need to cover here. This is just for beginners. I just want to get you guys up and running as quickly as we can. All right, so I'm going to say npm install react-bootstrap and then bootstrap like that. Okay, so this is going to install. It's going to take a second. Once it is done, I will be right back. All right, so we will continue in 1 second. We need to quickly thank the sponsor of this video and this series, which is AlgoExpert. AlgoExpert is the best platform to use when preparing for your software engineering and coding interviews. They've got over 160 coding interview questions on the platform. Check them out from the link in the description and use the code TechWithTim for a discount on the platform. All right, so all of that is installed. Now there's just one more step that we need to follow along with to actually be able to use Bootstrap. So we've installed Bootstrap. It's going to have Bootstrap inside of this node modules folder. And this means that we're now actually able to access this. So what I'm going to do is go inside of index.js, and I'm going to start by globally importing the style sheet for Bootstrap. So the way you do that is you type in the following line. I'm just going to copy it in. You guys can pause and write it out yourself. You're going to import bootstrap/dist/css/bootstrap.min.css. Once you import that, just like we imported index.css, all of the styles for Bootstrap will become available globally to all of your React components and JSX code. And now we can actually use Bootstrap. Perfect. So let me restart this development server here, yarn start, and now we're going to start styling our website with Bootstrap. Now, again, I'm going to recommend that you look at the Bootstrap website for the Bootstrap documentation. I will kind of briefly discuss the different styles and classes that I'm using, but this will be a lot easier for you to understand if you are familiar with Bootstrap. Okay, so for now, you can see that this is what our website kind of looks like. So as soon as I import Bootstrap, you can see some things kind of change here. It looks a little bit different, but at the end, this is going to look all nice. And yeah, we're just going to use a bunch of Bootstrap classes. Okay, so let's get started by going inside of app.js. The first thing that I want to do, if I'm looking at my website here, is I want to space out these different things. So I don't want to have search item and add item and actually my item display kind of being all mushed together. And you can see how they're mushed to the side of the screen here. I just want to have them kind of be aligned in a grid system. So in Bootstrap, there's something called a grid. Now, you're probably familiar with grid if you've looked at CSS stuff like Flexbox or whatever. Like you're probably familiar with what a grid is, but essentially you have rows and you have columns. So inside of a row, you have different columns, and that's the basics on how you align things, right? You have columns inside of rows inside of a container, and then you can align stuff in those rows and in those columns. So what I'm going to start by doing here is changing the class name of this div to be equal to a container. Now, this is a Bootstrap class, and you're going to see as soon as I do this, if I go back to my website here and I refresh, notice how everything kind of came in a little bit. So there's a margin now or some padding from the left and the right side of the screen. And it's already just made this so it's no longer squished to the edge of the screen, which is great. Okay, so I've added container, but now what I want to do is I want to put all of these different components here inside of their own row, and I want to kind of space them out a little bit. So what I'm going to do is make a div. I'm going to set its class name equal to row. So I have a div. I'm just going to copy this 3 times, and I'm going to put my different components inside of these divs. So let's end the div here. Okay, we now have our search bar inside of a div. I need to now put my item display inside of a div. So let's go ahead and do that, /div, and let's put our add item inside of this div too. Okay, /div. All right, so we're all good now. We can go back here and have a look at this and notice that it doesn't really make any difference, but we have all of our stuff inside of rows. Great. Now what I want to do is kind of space out these rows a little bit. So you can see that obviously we can't see the item display because there is no items to display. But if we have a look at these two things, you can see they're kind of right beside each other. So how do we space them out? Well, what we can do is we can add a margin to the top of them. So the way that you add a margin in Bootstrap is you use something called MT hyphen, and then whatever the size of the margin is that you want. So M stands for margin, T stands for top, and then after the hyphen, you can put a number in the range of 0 to 5. The higher the number, the more of the margin that you're going to get. So in this case, I'm going to put 3. Again, I'm going to recommend that you look at the Bootstrap documentation to see exactly what this does, but I believe when you type MT-3, what this actually gives you is a margin that is equal to 1 times the relative line height of your root element. So if you're writing this in CSS, it would be 1 rem. I believe that's what it is. Again, I'm not super confident on that, and I don't want to mislead any of you, so please do refer to the documentation, but this is just going to give us a margin. And you can mess with this number, and you can see you're going to get more or less margin. So I'm going to add MT-3 to all of these components here. And now if I go back to my website, you'll see there's a bit more space, right? So we have more space between our components. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change this that my item display is going to go above my search bar. I think that just makes more sense. The item's at the very top, then our search bar, then our add item. Great. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to go to my search bar, and I actually want to make this look a bit nicer, right? Because right now, if we're looking at our search bar, we can see all this stuff is mushed together. I don't want it to be like that. I actually want to have all 4 of my input fields in one line, and then I want to have my search button below it. And I want them all to be nice and evenly spaced out. So how are we going to do this? We are again going to use a container, some rows, and some columns. So I'm going to change this div right here to have a class name equal to a container. And it's important to recognize here that whenever you're using rows and columns, you need to be inside of some type of container. And so I define my container, and now I'm able to use row and column, or I'm able to use them and actually have them function. So now I'm going to create a div. I'm going to say the class name is equal to a row, and I'm going to put my title in this first row. So I'm going to say /div. Now, of course, rows are going to be stacked on each other vertically. And so I have row 1, my form will be in another row, and then my button will be in a separate row because those are kind of the 3 levels of vertical stuff that I want to have. Now I can actually remove this form entirely, and you'll see that if you don't remove this form tag or you don't add a special class to it, it's going to mess up your styling here. So just remove that form tag. We don't actually need it for this application. And now let's just quickly have a look at what we're getting here and see what it looks like. So if I refresh this, you can see it looks absolutely no different because, well, we haven't styled the rest of these components here. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put every single one of these input fields here inside of one large row, and inside of the row, they're going to be in individual columns. So we'll have one row that contains all of this stuff except the button, and then every single individual field here will be inside of a column, and that will allow us to have 4 of these input fields on one row. Okay, so I'm going to say div, I'm going to say class name is equal to, and this will be a row. I'm going to take this div, I'm going to put it at the very bottom here of all of my input stuff. So notice I'm not changing the button. I'm not putting that inside of this div because it's going to be in its own row. Okay, so it has the class name row. Now we might as well, while we're at it here, just add a row for the button. So we're going to say div class name is equal to row, and then I'll put this here like that. Okay, so now let's just quickly have a look at our site and notice how things are looking a bit nicer now, right? We have search for an item, we have all of our fields in their own different row here, and then we have search in its own row as well. So now what I want to do though is I want to take these 4 fields and I want to align them so they're in the same row, not in their own individual row. How do we do that? Again, we need to add a column. So I'm going to now go and wrap the label and the input for each of these fields here in another div. I'm going to say div class name is equal to call. And I might as well just copy this right here because I'm going to need it 4 times. So let's paste it 4 times, and then we can go and move all of these items inside of their respective columns. Okay, so let me grab this, paste it inside of its column. Okay, let me grab this, paste it inside of its column right here. And I should probably delete them once I paste them inside. That would be a good idea. So let me get rid of that. Okay. Now we will take this, delete it, put it inside of its column here. And finally, this one will go inside of its column. Okay, so let me save. Notice it looks like a bit of a mess here. Why is it giving me this empty string? Let me delete that. I don't need that. Okay, let me fix the spacing here. And now I think we are good. Okay, I'll slow down for a second. I know some of you are probably having a hard time following. So I have a row. I have another row. Inside of this row here, I have 4 columns. Okay, so I have a column for each of these individual input tags. Then I have another row for my button. And what's going to happen here is Bootstrap is automatically going to make it so that my 4 columns take up the exact same amount of space inside of my row. So if I go here and now I look at this and I refresh, you can see that if I expand this a bit, all of these items are going to be inside of the same row, right? We can see they're all lining up in the same row. Now, of course, if I make this too small, you can see things kind of get messed up. And the reason they get messed up is because the size of my input fields are not changing. And so they can't actually all fit in the same row. All right, nice. Now what I'm going to show you how to do is make it so these boxes look a bit nicer. Because obviously we now have kind of the alignment correct, but the spacing is all off. The search button's, mushed to this. These boxes look really ugly. How do we change that? Well, the way we change that's actually really easy. What we're going to do is add a class name to all of our input fields. So we're going to say class name is equal to, and this class name is simply going to be form control. Now, when you do this, it's just automatically going to give a default style to all of these input fields. So I'm going to add them to all of the input fields here. And you'll see that immediately they're just going to look nicer. So if I go here now, notice that we get these nice round edges. Things are just looking a bit cleaner here. And now notice how they're going to change size as we keep moving this in and out, right? So they actually get smaller and larger, which is what that class name or that class will help them do or allow them to do. Great. So now let's style the search button. So the search button, first of all, is too large. But before we deal with that, let's actually just make it not look like a default search button. So to do that, we're going to add a class name here. We're going to say class name is equal to, and then btn and btn-primary. Now, if you just make this btn, let's have a look at this here. We just make this btn, and we look, notice that we have a button, but it doesn't have a color, right? We can't actually see anything. So we need to now define the color as well. And the way we define the color is by saying btn and then whatever the color is. Now, there's a bunch of different colors you can choose from. One of them is primary, one of them is secondary, one of them is default, one of them is dark, and the rest you can find in the documentation. So for now, I'm just going to make it primary. This is like kind of a nice blue that I like to use in my applications. And you can see that we have this nice blue button now, and there's even a little hover when we go over top of it. All is good. Sweet. So now we need to make this button a little bit smaller. How do we do that? Well, we need to actually put this inside of a column and change the size of the column. So what I'm going to do is for my button, I'm going to now wrap it in a column. So I'm going to go inside of this row. I'm going to say div class name is equal to call, and then going to say slash div and end that div right there. Okay, so now when I go here, notice that it's automatically shrank itself because now it's inside of a column, so it doesn't need to fill the entire row. But the thing is, I want the button to be a little bit larger, and I want it to be in the middle. How do I do that? Well, in Bootstrap, there is kind of a 12-node grid system. Now, I'm probably misexplaining that, but essentially inside of every row, you have 12 columns that you can kind of place items inside of. So right now, since we have 3 items in this row, each of these items are taking up 3 columns inside of the row. And they automatically did that. Bootstrap will automatically resize them for you. So what I want to do is I want to have this search button take up 4 columns in the grid, but I want to have 4 columns to the left being taken up by something empty so that this pushes this to the middle. Seems a bit confusing, but I'll show you it's pretty straightforward. What I can do is I can add call, and then I can say call hyphen 4. And what this is going to do is make this a size 4. So it's going to make this column have size 4. So now if I go here and I refresh, you'll see that this actually, why is this not getting larger? Sorry, I think you just do col hyphen 4. I don't think you need col and then col 4. Okay, so if I just do col 4 and I look at this, let me refresh here. For some reason, it's not getting larger. Okay, let me have a look here, but I thought that that should work for us. Okay, so I found the error. What we actually need to do is we need to put the col4 tag right here on the button. So I actually don't need it in this div, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this closing tag of the div, and I'm just going to close it right up here. In fact, I can actually just do a slash like that to close the div, because the point of this div now is going to be to push this column over 4 spaces in the grid. So just look at it. I've added col4 here. I've added col4 as another class for my button. And now if I go here, notice it's in the middle and it's centered and it's taking up 4 spaces in the grid. So the idea is these first 4 spaces are being taken up by kind of an imaginary invisible div that's taking up 4 spaces in the column. This button is now going to be a length equal to 4 spaces, in the row. So 4 columns in the row. And now it's automatically centered because we pushed it 4 to the left. Now, let's say we only wanted this to take up 2 spaces in the row. If we only wanted it to take up 2 columns, what we would do is we'd have to push this over by 5, right? Because there'd be 5 on the left, 5 on the right, and then 2 in the middle for the search button if we wanted it to be exactly in the center of the grid or the center of the row. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. Anyways, that's it. We've got the button. It's sized correctly. Now all we need to do is space it out. There's a few different things we could do here. We could add some spacing for this row. So I could do something like MT-3 here. So margin top 3. And now if I go and look at this, notice we have a margin. Now that's kind of the nice way to do it. We also could just add a break line here. So we could say BR and then do a little line like this. This is probably not the preferred way. So we'll just leave it at MT-3. Perfect. Okay, so now we have styled this first component right here. What I want to do is style this, and then I need to style the item display. So for this one, rather than having all of our stuff go in this kind of pattern, what I will actually do is have it go vertically just to show you the difference. So this will actually be a lot easier. We're going to go to add item, and what we're going to do here is a very similar thing to what we did before. We're going to say class name is equal to container on the root div. We're then going to put this in a row. So we're going to say div class name is equal to row. Okay. I'll just copy this one more time because we're going to need this again. I'm going to take my add item. I'm going to put it inside of this first row. And then I'm going to remove this form tag because we no longer need this. I mean, we never really needed it before. And then I'm going to take all of this stuff except for the button. I'm going to put it inside of this row. Nice. Then lastly, I'm going to put this button inside of a row. So I'm going to say div class name is equal to row. Take my button and throw it inside of the row. All right, let me get rid of that empty string there that we don't need. Let's have a look here and notice that we get the same thing we get before. All of this stuff is taking up a row, and then we have our add item button at the bottom. Now, we already kind of know how to style this stuff, so let's just go ahead and do it. We're going to add a class name to all of our input fields here. What's the class name? Well, the class name is going to be form control. Remember, that makes our inputs look a little bit nicer and have some responsive design to them. So let's add the class name. I'm going a bit faster now because I've already shown this before. Let me just get rid of this empty string. We don't need that. And now I'm going to go to my button, and I'm going to add a class for this. So I'm going to say class name is equal to, and then this is going to be btn hyphen primary. Feel free to mess around with this and make it dark or something and see what it looks like. And then what's the last thing that we needed to do? We need to add some spacing here. So I'm going to say MT-3 for the row that my button is in. All right, so let's go and look at this now. And there we go. We have a beautiful add item form. And if we move this in and out, notice everything looks great. It's giving us kind of a minimum width here that we can go, and that's just based on all of the Bootstrap classes that we've defined. Now, we could make add item a bit smaller, but for now, I'll just leave it like this because I think that looks fine. Okay, so the last thing we need to do is look at item display. So first of all, let's see how it looks right now. So let's just add a sample item. I'm just going to do a random one. Tim, 299, type person. Brand will be great. Okay, and add item, and then notice it's showing it like this. So I actually want to show all of these items in a table. So let's see how we can go about building that. All right, so let's go to items display, and we're going to actually write a lot of stuff here to make sure that we can actually show our items in a table. Okay, so first of all, we need to actually create a table, right? So I have my div here. I'm going to call this class name is equal to, and then row. That's fine. Or sorry, not row. This will be a container. And then inside of here, I'm going to have 2 rows. One row for a header I'm going to create that just says items, and a second row for my table. So I'm going to make 2 rows. I'm going to say div class name is equal to row, and then /div, and then let's copy this. Let's paste this. Let's save it. And what we'll do inside of here is we'll make a header. So we'll just say h2, and then this will be /h2, and we'll say items like that. Okay, perfect. And then inside of here, we want to create a table. So we're going to say table class name is equal to, and Bootstrap has a class name called table. And then what we can do is we can define the color of the table or some properties of the table as well. So we can make this a striped table, which just means we're going to alternate between kind of like a white and a darker gray so that you can see the different entries in the table nicer. So that's what we'll do there. I'm going to end the table, and then I'm going to add my table header and my table body. So I'm going to saythead /thead, and then I'm going to say tbody and /tbody. Okay, now inside of the tbody, what we want to put is all of this. So our props.items.map, and then inside of here, we'll change this so that this is going to be a table row. So we'll start by actually just defining the table head. So for the table head, what we want to have is all of the different headers of our columns. So we are going to say tr, because we need a row here. And inside of here, we will say t, and then this will be h. Scope will equal column. And then we're going to say ID. That's the first thing we're going to show. So let's end the th. Now we can copy this a few times. So let's copy this, and all we're going to do is change these. So we're going to say ID. Then we're going to show the name. Then we're going to show the price. Then we're going to show the type. And then finally, we will show the brand. All right, so we now have our table headers. Now we want to have our table body. So up here, all we have to do is change this div to be a tr, so a table row. And then here, we're going to change this to be a th. So this means that needs to change to be a th as well. This needs to be a td for table data. So td. Okay, td. Let's just change all of these. td, td, td. I know I could use search and replace, but I'm already at this, so let's just keep going. td. And now what I'm going to do is remove the ID, the name, the price, the type, and the brand, because we no longer need this because we'll have a header above all of these entries saying what they actually are. Now I'm simply just going to change this th here to say scope is equal to, and then this will be row, and then we are all good. Okay, so in case you're unfamiliar with what th does, it just bolds the entry. So I want the ID to be bolded. Usually you have one entry that's kind of bolded to signify, hey, this is the identifier of this item, and then I'll show the name, the price, the type, and the brand of the item, right? And we just put it inside of a table row. So now what's happening is inside of our table body, we're going to be rendering different rows for every single one of our new items. That's all we need to do now to create this table. All right, so the table's created. I don't think there's any more classes that I need to define here. So next, what I will do is just refresh my page. And you can see that, oh, I shouldn't have refreshed again, but we have the header for our table. So ID, name, price, type, brand. It now says items. Now what we can do is add something in here, right? So we'd say Tim, $2.99, person, great, add it in. And then notice we have our first entry. So we have Tim, $2.99, person, great. We get another entry. We'll just say Tim, price, maybe this guy will be $4.99. He's still a person, but the brand will be not great, okay? Add item, and notice this is kind of what the striped looks like, right? We have the gray and then the white, and if we add another one, it would be gray, and there you go. Okay, so that is going to be it for this tutorial. I just want to show you how to style this website, the different ways you can manually style it versus using something like Bootstrap, and yeah, that's about it. In the next tutorial, I will show you how we can get this search for an item to work. Then we're going to actually implement kind of a very basic server system here. We'll be talking about hooks, effects, and a bunch of other more complicated stuff in React. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next tutorial video.